Welcome to the place where we gain knowledge through the lens of creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Artful Science. Thanks again for joining me here on Artful Science. Today's show is Digital Divide, being on the wrong side of the internet tracks. And my guest is Pierrette Renée Dagg, who serves as Director of Communications and Marketing for the Merit Network and was previous Creative Director at Crain's Detroit business. Merit owns and operates America's longest running regional research and education network, for those of you who may not know. Pierrette, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aaron. I am very excited to be here.
Oh, well, this is such an interesting topic from my standpoint because, we all kind of think about and we all know the internet and we all are on the internet in some sort of way, but we don't usually think about the internet and thinking about broadband, those types of things. So you're in this leadership role at Merit, right, which studies and is really responsible in many ways, right, for the internet infrastructure for Michigan's colleges and universities. And so we often hear this terminology of broadband. So what is broadband, and is it just the internet?
Kind of. So I think that the best thing that we could do for this conversation is to really start with a level set understanding. So when you're visualizing bandwidth or broadband speed, think of this maybe as a connection of roads. So if there's only one lane and a lot of traffic, it's going to take a very long time for that set of cars to get from one destination to the other. But if we have more lanes available or more bandwidth, the same group of cars can get from one lane to the other much more quicker. So that bandwidth is your broadband speed. Broadband is internet access, but it's really a connection that helps support high-speed upload and download for video, for data, and for images. And I think also for the people who are viewing this, right now, current federal standards are defining broadband as 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second upload. And technology can be wireless, satellite, fiber optic infrastructure. There are many different methodologies to deliver that. But I would really like to, as we begin the conversation here, I want to challenge that federally accepted notion of 25/3. As we've seen during the pandemic, upload is the new download. So symmetrical upload and download speeds really are critical for our futures. At Merit, as a research and education network who helps power the higher education community anchor institutions and K-12 networks, we actually see capacity growth of 25 to 35% year over year, and that's even pre-pandemic. So I would suggest that a more applicable number for bandwidth would really be maybe 100 to support current and future needs going forward.
So as we look at this, right, and we say, okay, we need this, and it seems to me too that, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I didn't really need this access to high-speed upload and download because there weren't necessarily as many things to do. But now there are just, it seems, so many things, of course, with the pandemic of schooling and education that's taking place online. And in some ways, really, nowadays, you can't engage in a lot of those opportunities, let alone Netflix or things like that, unless you've got this access, it seems. And so since it's so important, I wanted to, of course, touch on, and what a big focus for our show today is on that access. So, you guys look at that and study it. And so is there a disparity of the people who have access to broadband, to this high-speed opportunities?
Absolutely. When I think about the digital divide, I'm always reminded, and if you haven't read this, Aaron, I would highly suggest, there's an author and a researcher, his name was Neil Postman. and he wrote a book called A Bridge to the 18th Century, and that asks everybody to evaluate technological, social, and moral progress as a society as hand in hand. And when we do come up with, invent, or adopt a new technology, it's also critically important to think about those who might fall behind or be inadvertently negatively impacted when we adopt a new technology. So if we're thinking about a new technology and how it might help society, it's equally important to ask what sorts of people or institutions might get special economic or political power, or who might lose that political or economic or social power because of this change. And what we see, disparities are rampant between different groups of people when it comes to broadband access. And this is how that phrase, the digital divide, that's exactly what this is addressing. And we've seen disparities in terms of location, affordability, and race, among others. For location, just one example, Michigan ranks 30th in the nation for broadband access and adoption. And that's simply because infrastructure is not always available. Some of that can be a challenge with ROI with for-profit companies, just because a lot of our areas are so rural that we may have 2 people per 20 square miles. There are other issues too. So affordability is a challenge for all socioeconomically challenged populations. And some of our densely urban areas, particularly areas that are densely populated with African Americans, see this challenge. Right now, the U.S. Census Bureau cites Detroit Public Schools, who has a very high number of African American students, as the highest number of households in Michigan without broadband access. And that's more than 82,000 homes, Aaron. Number 2 in Michigan is Flint, also a highly African American populated area. They're the second highest number with nearly 15,000 households. And in Washtenaw County, which houses Ann Arbor, and you would assume there that we would have very good internet access, a study that the Quello Center at Michigan State University did last year showed that 57% of our K-12 students didn't have access to that Wi-Fi speed and broadband internet access at home.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So this is just extraordinary. Although maybe we should question the research coming from Michigan State for us at University of Michigan. So it's no.
We partnered with them on this, so we have to check here. I'm just teasing.
Right. No, totally. So these are of course extraordinary statistics, and it makes me think. And obviously, for example, the reality in Detroit stands out so strongly. And so what that means with over 80,000, people not having this access is that affects education, it affects entertainment, it affects access to so many different things, job opportunities, et cetera. And so as we think about that and we think about solutions, how could we best, for anyone who might be watching who has the ability to bring about change in Detroit or in their city or in their area, rural or urban, where there is this lack of access, what are the types of solutions they could bring to bear? What can they do? How could they act?
So that's really a challenging question. And right now, Aaron, with the pandemic, I think that COVID has brought awareness to a lot of these already existing issues, and it's exacerbated others. When you think of long-term planning, really we need broadband infrastructure. And the reason why we need broadband infrastructure is because all of the potential solutions, Wi-Fi, wireless, 5G, low Earth orbit, satellite, any way you may get broadband, eventually you need to connect to fiber at some point down that chain. So there are just many individuals, groups, community organizations, all of whom are working right now to work on this long-term planning to help find ways they might build community networks within their communities. They may do some data collection, which is one thing my organization works to do, is access and availability data collection to help support planning, grants, and funding. Certainly, Very quick measures or immediate measures can be put in place, such as community Wi-Fi hotspot networks, extending Wi-Fi into parking lots, things like that. But it needs to be a holistic movement to address not only the immediate needs of our residents and our students, but also to do long-term planning to eventually, hopefully, get that fiber to the home, that last mile access to every single citizen, just like we did with the Rural Electrification Act in the 1930s.
Got you. And, you know, referencing that history point raises another thing about could you speak a little just to, so do you feel like we have a public imperative that there are ethical reasons why, as a public, we should be investing public dollars in this equity of access? I think back, and you've mentioned previously about the way in which, for example, Black women had access to certain educational opportunities because of radio, those types, right? So do you feel like there's an ethical responsibility we have as a public to address this issue?
You know, we absolutely do, Aaron. If you look at different studies, you can find that civic participation, workforce development, lifetime earning potential, intention of intending higher education or not, student outcomes and success in terms of both college success, K-12 success, standardized learning. You can look at the property rates, incidents of violent crime. Broadband is imperative to how we live, how we work, our access to medicine, our participation in democracy, our access to jobs, positively impacting our food waste and our environment. So if you think about technology in terms of improving society, if you don't consider now, because some have and some do not, if you don't consider access to the internet and access to broadband as a basic human right, to me personally, I feel like you're saying, well, some people are more worthy than others of having these opportunities.
Wow, it is just extraordinary and such an incredibly important issue that I think we really don't think about enough, because we just, sometimes take it for granted, and aren't thinking about these disparities and how that affects all of us in society. So unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I always like to ask my guests, given that we are at this intersection of the arts and the sciences, whether you have an artistic practice that you engage in yourself or that you like to appreciate. And seeing a little instrumentation in your background leads me to know that, in fact, you do, but just wondering, where are you in the arts?
In another life, Aaron, I actually had a fine arts degree, and I started out as an artist, so I'm still an avid photographer and musician and poet, and I love being a consumer of all of those things too. So I think the art part in STEAM is critical to the success of the entire STEAM movement, and also for me personally, art is still a way of life.
Totally, totally awesome. Pierrette Renée Dagg, thank you for helping us gain knowledge through the lens of creativity here on Artful Science.
Thank you, Aaron.